Well, good morning. I was just telling somebody a minute ago that I'm not normally a morning person, and I'm really not normally a Saturday morning person. One of the first things that happens when you are born into or join our family culture is that you immediately are going to bed very late, and you're getting up as late as humanly possible. So that's my standard practice in life. But I really appreciate you guys being here. I want to talk about a lot of what I talked about yesterday was sort of what's wrong, what is the tenor of the time, what is the spirit of the age, and I talked about the spirit of the age as being driven by animosity and extremism, and that the response of Christians in the spirit of the age driven by animosity and extremism should be grace and truth. And what I'm also going to talk about today, I'm going to get a little bit more specific about the how in which we are to engage, and how in which I believe Christians should engage in the body politic, in the political culture of the United States. And the how is really, really, really important, because one of the things that I grew up learning as a Christian was that engaging in politics as a Christian was about issues, okay? So what is a Christian concerned about? Issues. You're pro-life, you're for religious liberty. I grew up as I said yesterday, a kid of the Cold War. You're opposing atheistic Soviet communism. So these are the issues that you cared about. And even as a younger kid, I noticed kind of a void, because when I was being taught about how to be a student, a Christian student, it wasn't about outcomes. So what is a Christian student? Well, a Christian student gets all A's. No. I mean, yeah, you want A's, right? It's not like you don't want to strive for excellence, but there was a lot of the how to be a student. How do you love your fellow students? How do you interact with your teachers? How do you manifest the particular values that govern your life as a Christian when you were a student? When I got older and I got married, there was a lot of talk about how are you a Christian husband or a Christian spouse? And the answer wasn't, well, just don't get divorced, right? The outcome, we made it, honey. We did it. We were Christian husband and wife. We're dying together. That's not the goal. I mean, it is a goal, but it is not the goal. There was a lot about how do you have a rich and loving marriage? How do you love sacrificially? How do you serve each other? There's a lot, books and books and books and books are written about this, and more books about the how. Then, you become a Christian in business. And what's the objective of being a Christian in business? Make a lot of money. Well, you do want to be successful, but almost every part of Christian business, thoughtful engagement with Christians as businessmen is a lot about the how. How do you treat your colleagues? How do you treat your employees? One of the things, Christian businessmen who struggle, and I think maybe some of us have struggled in this room, or we've been around people who struggle. And Christian businessmen who've struggled time and time again, I've heard, I have deep faith that God is going to sustain and support me and my family through this crisis. A Christian businessman who's been trained and understands Christianity and business, if someone went to him and said, if you commit a little light consumer fraud, you'll be okay here. Because think of what will happen if you do. Your family will be okay. You'll be able to stay in the school district. There's going to be less strain on your marriage. Look at all of the benefits of just a little light consumer fraud. Well, the Christian businessmen I know say, no. The Lord is going to protect this family. The Lord is going to sustain this family. So no consumer fraud. And then you come in and say, well, wait a minute, I got an idea. Why don't you hire a guy who will commit the consumer fraud for you? How many Christian businessmen say, that is the ticket, because I'm not committing fraud. but the guy I hire can do it, and it's on him. Uh-oh, are we beginning to see where I'm heading on some of this? In politics, how do we engage in politics? Well, let's do the blindingly obvious example that that's the elephant in the room. Here's one thing. We are not supposed to hate our enemies, right? We're supposed to love our enemies. We're supposed to bless those who persecute you. So do we hire a politician to hate them for us? Apparently we do. Apparently we do. At an 81% rate, apparently we do. So one of the things that, and when we confronted this reality, and when you began to confront this reality, I began to think a lot more, going all the way back to 2016, how much we have been trained, and even in what this was, do y'all remember Christian worldview training? So I've been to seminars of Christian worldview training, all like any good Reagan conservative Christian. I've been to all the Christian worldview training. And what Christian worldview training was, here's the biblical case for the Constitution. Here's the biblical case for capitalism. Here's the biblical case against communism. All issues. So that we're trained to think reflexively as politics is a set of issue engagements, rather than another way, along with business, along with education, along with our family, about how we manifest the gospel of Jesus Christ in its fullness in our communities. We don't think of it like that. We put it over somewhere else here that is in the issue box. That's the issue box. Everything else is the holistic box. This is where we live and show ourselves more fully. The problem, of course, is that doesn't, A, it's not biblical, and B, it doesn't work at all, okay? As somebody who's, in the public, I even hate to say public eye, because I'm so nerd niche, I'm in the nerd public eye, like the political nerd public eye. And I say that with all due affection to everyone who's here. And someone who's sort of in the nerd public eye, one of the things that you get is a lot of viciousness. And you get a ton of viciousness from people with, have you seen this in Twitter? There's this little purple box that people will have by their Twitter, by their name, that's a cross. It's like a purple box with a little white cross in it, and it's sort of a sign that I'm a Christian. And watch out. Watch out when somebody tweets at you with that purple box with the cross, because it's going to get nasty. You can almost always predict it. It's going to get nasty. I can remember even all the way back in my very partisan Republican days. I was serving in Iraq in 2008, and at that time I had, my wife was working with Mitt and Ann Romney to try to, this was the first Romney effort to become president. She was working with Mitt and Ann Romney. And somebody tracked down my Army email address. I'm in Ford Operating Base Caldwell in Eastern Diyala Province, and I get this email, "You hate America. You and your wife," just ripping me to shreds, signed "In Christ." Like, Steve. And of course he thought he was doing everything exactly right. Why? Issues. I was on the wrong side of the issues. And we'd compartmentalized character away from this. And it doesn't work because there's no biblical basis for that at all. And then the other thing is, if somebody comes to me and they say, well, that guy who wrote you when you're in Iraq, Steve, he's really awesome. He's really an awesome guy. You should see him. He's a great husband. He's a great father. He's a wonderful person in business. He's, volunteers at the local homeless shelter. All of those things are real, but they don't make his cruelty in politics less real, okay? So it's not like the online world is the fake world. I can say whatever I want to say in politics, or it's just politics, because I'm sure you've heard this, politics ain't beanbag. Politics ain't beanbag is a sort of thing that politicians say to justify being total jerks. It's just politics. And so, but you cannot compartmentalize your morality, because if you're inflicting cruelty on another person, you know what you're doing? You're just inflicting cruelty on another person. So I started to think a lot about, and as I began to see this startling change, and Justin alluded to it earlier, but before 2015, the population of Americans who were most likely to say that character mattered and character was an important requirement for a politician, most likely to say that were evangelicals, white evangelicals to be specific, most likely. And I know why. Bill Clinton, okay? Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton did what Bill Clinton did, and I'll just be honest about it, y'all, I'm still mad about it. I'm still mad that he got away with it. I'm still mad about it. I'm not over it. I need to be over it. I need to repent. But I'm not over it. But in 1998, I remember the Southern Baptist Convention put together a statement, a resolution on character in public officials. In 1998, everyone remember 1998? Who's old enough? That's when the Lewinsky scandal broke, 1998. And it had this key line in there. And it said, tolerance of serious wrong by leaders sears the conscience of a culture, spawns unrestrained lawlessness, and surely will result in God's judgment. 1998, Southern Baptist Convention, largest Protestant denomination. And when that was passed, I remember it. I'm a young lawyer living in Kentucky, and that thing passes, and I'm like, heck yeah, man. Heck yeah. And then I remember, in 2014, I don't know why this was going on, but in 2014, everyone was sort of talking about this deep Republican bench and all these great people. And for some reason, I thought back to 1998 and Bill Clinton and impeachment and all of this, and I had this weird thought that went through my mind. And the weird thought was, I wonder how Republicans would handle it if staying to that commitment cost something. I wonder how Christians would handle it if staying to that commitment, that, remember, this was pretty bold, tolerance of serious wrong by leaders sears the conscience of a culture, leads to unrestrained lawlessness, and surely will result in God's judgment. What if that costs us something? What will happen? And I kind of had this kind of sick feeling in my stomach. And I still remember it to this day, because I thought, oh boy, little did I know what was about to happen. So that right now, on all fronts, the latest data is that Americans believe that character is less important than they used to believe that it was. The biggest drop, and the people with the lowest percentage of commitment to character, white evangelicals. White evangelicals. What changed? Did our theology change? Did truth change? The imperatives of partisan politics. That's what changed. That's the change. That's it. That was it. That was it. And so we got into this, and I'll never forget when I really began to feel outside my own community so much. So I think this was in 2018. So I spent years as a religious liberty lawyer, pro-life lawyer. I still support religious liberty. I'm still pro-life as they come. And I would speak in churches, and I would talk about my work, pro-life work, religious liberty work, free speech work, and people would give me standing ovations. They loved it. They loved it. I had clients. I would go on American Family Association radio all the time, American Family Association radio, to talk about what I was doing to fight to keep Christian student groups on campus, and they loved me. It was fantastic. And then in 2018, the weirdest thing happened. Franklin Graham, who's done many, many great things, and in fact, I just defended him on Twitter this morning because people were piling on him for praying for President Putin, which we should be praying, because since war depends on whether or not President Putin says go, we should be praying to turn his heart away from war. And so people are piling on him for praying for President Putin. And so I just defended him today. So God bless him. He's done many wonderful things. But in 1998, he wrote an op-ed that said, if Bill Clinton will lie to his wife and his daughter, he will lie to America. Yes, true. Yes, true. In 2018, he says, that was all a mistake. This Bill Clinton, this Stormy Daniels paying a hush money to cover up a porn star affair while his wife's just given birth, third wife, sorry, is just given birth. That's just between Trump and Melania. And then fast forward, he goes, but Pete Buttigieg is married to a man, and that's a problem. It's like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me with this? What's the consistency here? The only consistency is the partisan imperative. That's the consistency. So I wrote a short thing that's saying, look, this is bad. You don't say adultery is disqualifying for a Democratic president. Adultery plus porn star hush money payments that led to somebody being in jail are nobody's business as a Republican. And then you have a gay guy running for president, but he's gay. You just don't do that. And guess what happens? Next morning I wake up and in my inbox is an email from the American Family Association to sign a petition to condemn David French for his yellow journalism. I think you can still find it out there. I think it's close to 100,000 signatures now. And I remember going to church that next night with my father-in-law and mother-in-law, and the anger expressed towards me in the pews of that church because they'd gotten the email and I was no longer one of them. And that was the beginning, not the beginning, that was the midpoint of a terrible journey. In 2017, when Roy Moore ran for Senate in Alabama and there was corroborated evidence that he had committed acts of sexual misconduct with minors, and my wife and I both came out strongly against having somebody like that as senator from Alabama. And my wife very painfully and transparently writing about her own sex abuse that she suffered as a child. We would walk into a gymnasium in my kids' own Christian school for my kids' own basketball game, and there were families that turned their backs on us. Turned their backs on us. They wouldn't even face us, wouldn't even look at us because of Roy Moore. And why? Because Roy Moore was right on the issues. Roy Moore was right on the issues. I could go on all day with stuff that would send chills down your spine of things that Christians have said and done to my family because Donald Trump was right on the issues. He was right on the issues. And how dare you? How dare you oppose a man who's right on the issues? You godless man. You godless, demonic man. But when I look at Scripture, that's not what Scripture says about how we are to interact with our fellow man. And I think a lot about Micah 6:8. Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you, O man? What is good? To act justly. So you know what? You can't leave justice behind. It's not all about just being nice, right? If someone's saying that the role of a Christian is to walk into America and just be nice, be the nicest person in the room, that ain't it. Act justly, okay? Act justly. You cannot ignore injustice. You cannot as a Christian. But then it goes on. But the act justly part is actually the easy part now. That's when you can tweet like a raging maniac about things that you don't like. I'm just seeking justice. But then it keeps going. It says, love mercy, or some translations, love kindness. And then the last one is walk humbly before the Lord your God. These are three non-optional, interlocking obligations that we have moving into the public square. That's the how right there. That's the how. And let's take them in reverse order. So when I talk to people about how am I interacting in a world that's often very, very, very hostile to some of the issues that I care about, life. People are very hostile to a pro-life point of view in many parts of this country, especially after the experience my family has suffered in the last 5 or 6 years, which caused me to absolutely feel shame that I did not see racism more clearly in the United States of America? It had to come at my own household for me to see it. Don't be like me, okay? Don't be like me where you have to wait for something to come to your own household before you will see what other people are telling you is real, okay? So if you're going to stand up and you're going to speak out on issues surrounding race, people are going to get really angry. You're going to often walk into situations and rooms where people are going to feel very hostile towards you. So I go a reverse order. My general strategy is to approach humbly, humbly, be kind, seek justice. Humility, kindness, justice. Now again, they're all important. I'm not putting justice at the last. I'm actually putting justice at the last because I think the first two get you there easier. Okay? So what does it mean to walk humbly in this world of politics? I think of two things. I think one is recognize complexity, and recognize your own fallibility. All right? Recognize complexity. One of the things that I have found is incredibly common is there is a certain amount of ferocity that attaches to certainty. Okay, so if I know that I'm right, and it is obvious that I am right, I have very little tolerance for dissenting or opposing points of view. I can't even see them. I can't even understand them. But every single issue of any consequence, even if we can agree on the top line, we want to end abortion. We want to achieve racial justice and erase as much as we possibly can the legacy of 345 years of legalized slavery or second-class citizen status enforced by violence. 345 years, and it's not like that all ended when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed. It was just ended the legalized part of it, okay? How do you end abortion? Let's just stay on those two issues. They're not the only two issues. So end abortion, how do you achieve justice and ameliorate the effects of 345 years of legalized bigotry and violence? That is hard. That is really, really hard. One of the things that I talk about a lot when, not as much in church settings, is foreign policy and the Middle East and things like that. And I have kind of this shorthand knowledge of when I'm talking to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. It's when they walk in and they say, well, here's how we need to solve the Middle East. I have trouble staying tuned because I'm thinking, oh, okay, you got it, all right. We have to recognize complexity. And what does that mean? What does that mean? Recognize complexity. It means being a sponge. It means being a sponge. Don't be afraid of ideas. Absorb and evaluate ideas. Remember what I said last night about don't be a lawyer, be a juror? You are deciding between competing arguments. You are not invested in a partisan side. You're invested in justice. You're invested in justice, and you want to hear all the ideas you can hear about what is just and what is the best method or the best policy to achieve justice. So that means you approach the world in a spirit of openness. You approach the world in a spirit of openness. This theory that everyone's talking about, I want to hear about this theory. I want to read about it from people who advocate it, and I want to read about it from people who oppose it. I'm a sponge. This interesting study that said this policy in city X worked, I want to hear about that. I'm a sponge. I want to absorb. It doesn't mean there's no discernment at all, because you're going to hear competing things and competing realities, but you have to acknowledge complexity. And once you begin to acknowledge complexity, a lot of things start to look, A, difficult, which is discouraging, but B, you begin to realize, oh, I can see a step I can take. I might not know the path on the whole 1,000 miles, but I see this one. Oh, and I see this one. and I see this one, and I'm moving. And I think about that a lot in the context of both abortion and race. So let's take race, for example. A lot of people totally and utterly reject the concept and get really angry if they even hear the word systemic racism come out of anybody's mouth. But what is systemic racism? There's lots of definitions. Here's my favorite definition. It is when structures that were created by racist people for racist reasons are maintained by non-racist people for non-racist reasons. Okay, I'll say that again. When a structure is created by racist people for racist reasons, and it is maintained by non-racist people for non-racist reasons. I'll give you an example that's kind of easy to understand and often used. So for years and years and years in this country, Black Americans in particular did not have the freedom to live where they wanted to live. They either were explicitly confined to certain parts of a city or a county, or they were jammed in by processes like redlining, making it very, very, very difficult to move, to go where jobs were, to go where opportunity was. And so if you imagine, let's just take this baptistry, for example, and you imagine that here's the place where people are confined to live. And the edges are the walls of law confining them. And these walls were created by racists for racist reasons. And so everyone lives here for a while, and everyone else out here has mobility and opportunity. In here, you do not have mobility, you do not have opportunity. So that over time, you reach a point where the people out here have a net worth 10 times greater than the people in here. So the people out here, they will do things, even if they're not racist, even if you put them under a polygraph and you say, and you test them in their heart of hearts. I know polygraphs don't really do that and work, but whatever. You get what I'm saying? They're not racist. Well, they might think, my number one investment right now is my home. This is where my entire family net worth is located. And if there's a multifamily dwelling that is built a mile away, it might impact my home value. So I'm against the multifamily dwelling, which is a way that people who have less income can move out of here into here. Or you think, I moved to this place for the great schools. If the lines of the school district are redrawn to where you're dipping some of the school district into here, you're going to lower the test scores, and you're going to be eliminating part of the reason why I moved here. So again, test scores, home value, all of these things, they have nothing to do with, do I believe that people are greater or lesser because of the color of their skin? But if you're in here, even after all the formal legal barriers have been removed, in other words, there's no law making me stay in here. Well, where am I getting the down payment to come here? Because my net worth, because my family's been here for generations, is 10% of the net worth out here. So where am I getting the down payment? Well, I don't want a down payment, but maybe there's a cheap apartment. Nope, that's blocked by NIMBYism. Well, maybe I can advocate for better schools in this district so that my kids will have a better shot. Nope, can't do that because that's going to dilute the strength of the suburban school district. And do you see? Do you see? And so this is why we have to be open to these ideas. We have to be open because we have to be able to step into the shoes of other people and understand that even if there isn't a formal wall that is crafted by law, if there are a series of walls that still exist, crafted by racist law, if there is a series of walls that exist because downstream effects of the racist law, I'm still confined by law. I'm still limited by law. And that's a problem. Now, the interesting thing about this is not a right-left deal. Some of the worst places on planet Earth for what's called NIMBYism, not in my backyard, are progressive cities. There's a New York Times story about the effort, a great New York Times video about Palo Alto. You know, Palo Alto, where like you can have a 1,400 square foot ranch home built in 1959 and it's worth $100 billion. But so people don't want to mess with that. right? So this is an idea that's very, very challenging to people. How do we fix that? What do we do about that? That's hard. So that's complexity. Let's talk about fallibility. Fallibility is to have to understand who we are and why we are. So a lot of us, I'm going to give you a concept, and again, this is one of these concepts that if you remember nothing about what I say, remember this one. And it's from Jonathan Haidt, and it's called The Elephant and the Rider. And the elephant and the rider, it explains why we are where we are. And so think of yourself as an elephant and a rider. So the rider is your rational mind, okay? The rider is the part of you that recognizes that 2 + 2 is 4, that the Southeastern Conference is the best football conference in America, you know, inarguable facts like that. And so we like to think that we are run by the rider, right? That's what we like to think. That if you explain something to me, I'm a smart enough and a rational enough person that I'm going to be able to adjust course. Well, Haidt says, no, wait, there's the rider and then there's the elephant. And the elephant is everything else about you. It's your friendships, it's your ethnicity, it's your upbringing, it's your geographic location, it's your everything else. And what Haidt says, if the elephant doesn't want to move, the rider ain't moving. But if the elephant wants to move, the rider's coming along. In other words, we like to think of ourselves as super hyper rational people, when the reality is we're driven by a lot of other things. And this is a humbling realization, right? So one of the things that I've tried to do in my life is unpack my elephant. Why is it I am the way that I am? Why is it that I have the views that I have? And the reality is, when I started to sort of unpack and understand my own elephant, I began to realize a lot of the reason the way I am is kind of the accident of my birth, the providential reality of my parenting, the parenting that I had, the geographic location and where I lived. That's a lot of my elephant. It's a lot of my elephant. And that's really something humbling to realize. Man, we're still, I'm running out of time and we're still in the humility thing. Goodness. Okay. It's very humbling. And so what's part of the elephant of the church? What's part of the elephant of the church? Well, part of the elephant of the church is actually driven by its geography and culture more than its theology. So here's what I mean. American evangelicalism is very heavily, disproportionately Southern. It is very heavily. It is not as if American evangelicals are evenly distributed across the United States. Nope, 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 nope. We are disproportionately concentrated in the Southeastern Conference and heavily disproportionately concentrated in certain communities within the larger Southeastern Conference. And we are shaped by that culture in two really important ways. Okay, some of this is going to be challenging for you guys. It's very challenging for me. One is we have a hyper emphasis on verticality in our theology. In other words, the most important relationship is the vertical relationship between God and man. We have much less emphasis on horizontal commitments and obligations. So you will often hear critiques of a lot of anti-racism kind of thinking and systemic thinking because it distracts from verticality. It distracts from verticality. The reality, however, as I read Scripture and I've studied more Scripture, is that no, it's not that the verticality, the vertical relationship isn't critically important. It's that the vertical relationship implies horizontal obligations as well. That's the act justly part. If I'm in a vertical relationship with my Lord and Savior, I have horizontal obligations to my neighbors and to my community. But we have a hyper emphasis on verticality. Why? Why? Some really interesting stuff. Wendell Berry has written about this. This is part of the legacy of the distortion of racism and segregation and slavery in the southern United States. The most religious part of the country for a long time, not just now. And what verticality did is it allowed you to ignore horizontal injustice. So that if the person that is not allowed to eat at my lunch counter is also a Christian and saved, then the most important thing is taken care of, right? The most important thing is taken care of. They're going to be in heaven. I'm going to be in heaven. That is of paramount significance. My treatment, whether they're at my lunch counter or not, is of meaninglessness by comparison. And you see a lot of the legacy of this where people will say, here's how we deal with slavery. We just have to have everyone become converted to Christianity. Well, we've tried that already. That was called 1955 in the South. The South was overwhelmingly Christian on the white and black side of the spectrum. And you know what? White Christians were turning hoses on black Christians. That's what happens when it's all verticality and no horizontal. Then there's another one. There's another one. This was, oh boy, this is shame, honor, culture. Shame, honor, culture. The South is steeped in shame, honor, culture. This is a part of the legacy of the original settling of the region and the heavily Scotch-Irish influence in the South. We're a shame, honor culture. There are many other parts of America that are not shame, honor cultures. What does that mean? It means that those of us who grew up in the South are quick to take offense and quick to seek to defend our honor, and extremely prickly about any perception that anyone is looking down on us. Now, did I just describe to you the entire business model of right-wing media? It is catering to that exact instinct. Somebody somewhere is disrespecting me. Somebody somewhere thinks poorly of me. Somebody somewhere isn't giving me the respect that I deserve. This is a huge deal. It's a huge deal. It's why somebody can be riding a $200,000 Mastercraft at the front of a Trump boat parade and believe they're oppressed in the United States of America. I kid you not. It's interesting. There was even a University of Michigan study done in the late 1990s that showed when a Southern man is bumped in the hallway, they have a different physiological response than men from other regions. A different physiological response. I can remember when I went up to law school and people were bumping into me all the time in the subway, I was like, who wants some? And like everybody's just going about their day, you know? Hey, you're supposed to say you're sorry, you know? It's one of the things, like even today, if you see a Southern gathering, two guys bump into each other, sorry, man. Sorry, man. And we think, well, that's politeness. No, it's like, I'm avoiding the duel right now. Did you know in the state of Kentucky, when you swear an oath to join the bar, I'm still a member of the Kentucky Bar Association, most of the oath has nothing to do with the Constitution. Most of it is a promise not to participate in a deadly duel. I'm not even making that up. I will not participate in a deadly duel. I will not stand as a second in a deadly duel. I didn't even know what a lot of that meant till Hamilton. So we have a culture that is heavily influenced by excessive verticality and shame honor. Doesn't that start to make a lot of sense as to why the way we are the way we are? And then when you understand it, when you know it, I mean, I began to see that in myself, and I still have it. I have this quick defense of my own honor, just this quick defense of my own honor, and I have to suppress it, and I have to fight it, and I have to realize that's part of the elephant that needs to be under control. So complexity, fallibility, understand who we are and why we are, and it's a really interesting exercise to do that. And then let's move to the kindness point, to the kindness. And here's what I want to do. So this is a great PCA audience. So, you know, what we've not done, this is just glaring. I'm sure people have been tweeting about this omission. We have had 0 references to the Westminster Larger Catechism this entire weekend, okay? So let me fix that, okay? Let me fix that. All right, so the Westminster Larger Catechism talking about the 9th commandment. Do not lie, do not lie. Oh boy, are you ready for this? Now think about this in the context not just of your personal life, but in politics. Yikes. The duties required in the 9th commandment are the preserving and promoting of truth between man and man, and the good name of our neighbor, as well as our own, appearing and standing for the truth, and from the heart sincerely, freely, clearly, and fully speaking the truth, and only the truth in matters of judgment and justice, and on all other things whatsoever. Okay, now that's challenging. Get ready. A charitable esteem of our neighbors, loving, desiring, and rejoicing in their good name, sorrowing for and covering of their infirmities, freely acknowledging of their gifts and graces, defending their innocency. Now you're just going to have to turn off cable news after you read this. A ready receiving of a good report and an unwillingness to admit of an evil report concerning them. Man, I hate reading that because I am in violation right here. That is tough stuff. That's tough stuff. Discouraging talebearers, flatterers, slanderers. Love and care of our own good name and defending it when need requireth. I love the if, the requireth. So that's how you know I'm legit reading from it. It says requireth. So we're supposed to love and defend the good name of our neighbors? Man, that's rough. That's hard. As Justin says, that means I might lose. And one thing I cannot lose. I cannot lose. So that's humility. That's kindness. That's a tangible way of conducting yourself with kindness and mercy. And then the last thing from that, after you understand complexity, after you understand fallibility, after you understand the necessity of kindness and the loving and the care and the concern for your neighbor, including the good name of your neighbor, then you walk in and you say, let's seek justice together. Let's seek justice together. Now, does that always work? No. If there's one thing I've found, it's that you can be the kindest person in the room. Well, wait a minute. I'm never that. Okay. If there's one thing I found, you can be reasonably kind in the spectrum of the room. You can say things that are biblically true, and people will still despise you for it. They'll still despise you for it. People will despise you for wanting to preserve the life of unborn children. They'll despise you for it. Even if you take a position that says, my main method of trying to protect the life of the unborn isn't by state bans, but rather by means and methods to try to make sure that women want to keep their children, even if that's your tactical approach on that, people will despise you even for the goal. They'll think it stigmatizes a person's choice to abort a child. They'll despise you. But here's one of the things. I want to really try to make sure that if somebody's going to despise me, they're going to despise me for the right reason. And it's not because I've been cruel. It's not because I've been arrogant, but it's because I've been just. Okay? We have this really big problem right now that we take criticism as validation. You've heard this thing, there's a phrase that I hate so much. I'm sure you've heard it. Some of you have heard it. Well, I'm taking flack. Must mean I'm over the target. Sometimes it just means you're a jerk. To be honest, I mean, really. And so one of the things I want to be sure is because I know, the person who manifested these virtues more than any other human being who ever walked the earth was Jesus. And he was crucified. And he ended the first part of his earthly ministry with like half a dozen people around him who still liked him or weren't afraid to be seen with him. That's how he ended up. So that's when people say, well, you know what, Christians, you'd be a lot more successful in politics if you were just more like Jesus. Well, we should all be more like Jesus, but I know somebody who was a lot like Jesus. His name was Jesus, and he was crucified by the ruling authorities. So we should not expect in becoming more like Jesus as we humbly seek that we will achieve some great earthly outcome. Even when he came back, he did not come back as an avenging angel saying, how dare you? One of the funniest, and I don't recommend it as a Christian, but it's so funny, is a Saturday Night Live skit called Did Jesus Unchained? And it was after Django Unchained, the Tarantino movie. And it was like, imagine Jesus, it was The Rock, I believe, as coming back as a, as an action star. Like, you tried to crucify me now. And that's kind of the world's version of what a resurrection would be like. Ho, 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 you thought you had me. And you're Neo from the Matrix. The bullets are heading towards you. And then, no, that wasn't what he did. He appeared first to women who were not considered to be the number one witnesses you're going to call to make a case in court. He met behind closed doors with a really pretty small number of people, appeared to a pretty small number of people, and then he's gone, leaving behind a few hundred folks still scared out of their minds. That was what winning looked like. That's what triumph over death and hell looked like in the earth. He didn't come back and depose Caesar Augustus or anyone who followed him. But hardly anyone remembers Augustus's name, and everyone remembers Jesus's name. So that's where our eyes should be. That's where our eyes should be. And so what I would challenge us is, as we think about engaging in politics, we cannot focus on the what to the exclusion of the how. We cannot. In a pluralistic society, in particular, we're never, just as a practical matter, we're never going to dominate our enemies. Are you kidding me? No way. It's funny, I think it's simultaneously, I think I said this last night, I think there's too many of us and too few of us, evangelicals and believers. There's too many of us in the sense that we're strong enough to think we can actually win all the time in politics, but we're small enough to where we also at the same time think we're really persecuted. So we're kind of in this never land. Like, we can win, we're strong, but we're weak. We're strong, but we're weak. So what I would encourage us is to not think always about the what, the issues, but the how. And what I would submit is Micah has two great verses that can guide us. Micah 6:8, what does the Lord require of you, O man? To seek to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before the Lord your God. And as we manifest that presence in our society, a society that has been afflicted with injustice, to what end? And then I'm going to end with a quote that was one of George Washington's favorites. He quoted it almost 50 times, a scripture in Micah, almost 50 times in his writing. Repopularized by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who quoted it in Washington's farewell address in his musical. But it's really famous because of Micah also. Micah 4:4. Every man shall live under his own vine and his own fig tree, and no one shall make him afraid. That's a beautiful vision of a pluralistic, just republic. We act justly with kindness and humility. Why? So that every man can live under his own vine and his own fig tree, and no one shall make him afraid. That's why we engage, and that's how we engage. Thank you all very much.